So this is the plan that started work on in the first part of the year, and we've had a few iterations. I think what you still have is a draft. I know we have some changes, and I'll talk about a couple changes here. Time we have today, but Ron and Jim and others have looked at this. Terry, Vince, we've had a couple meetings on this and gone over things fairly thoroughly. So give you a rundown of the results. Let's see if I hit the right number. Okay, so I should say the purpose of the plan is all about the water side of the system. And we're not looking at wastewater, and I'm not really looking at horizontal infrastructure either. So nothing to do with your transmission pipelines and that. It's strictly source capacity is what we're looking at. So the first part of it was to look at what your use is and project what future use is, and that was all done in terms of the single family equivalent, which you're familiar with. So the SFE, as it's known, turns out you guys average about 2 SFE per account in the district. The residential is about 1.8, but when you just lump everything together, it comes out to about 2. And so in terms of water, right now, Mountain Village 2,078 SFE, Meadow Village 3,300, for a total of just under 5,400 SFE. So that's the end of 2021. And so can we get rid of Mason? Yeah, 4 minutes. Okay, so the district has a pretty nice database of SFEs, and so the projection is from 2015, using the data from 2015 to 2021. That seems to be the most relevant trend for what we know today and what we can forecast. So the Meadow, we can look at that projection. We can split Meadow and Mountain, and we can look at total. But you're about 3.9% per year for the total district, 4.7 in the Meadow, 2.6 on the Mountain. So you're going to double that. That's a doubling in about every 18 years. That's where you're at with that. And so you can see there's that plot on the right as the model fits to the data. And so you can see there's a bit of noise there, but generally it's a pretty good fit. And so when I do the projection, and I'll just show you some numbers on the next slide, basically all we're doing is taking that line and projecting it out. So we're calculating, excuse me, SFEs is the y-axis or the vertical axis, in years is of course the horizontal on those plots. But that's how that's done. There we go. So if you look at your growth projection, I just picked some 5-year increments. One thing that the planning study, we used a 20-year period. So it went from 2022 to 2042. Okay. So at those growth rates, you're out to 12,600 SFE out in 2042. So that's more than a doubling of what you have today on the water side. And, the Meadow, of course, with that 4.7% growth rate, it outpaces the Mountain considerably. So most of the growth would be in the Meadow. The Mountain, is also would see significant growth over that same time period. In terms of supply, this is the Meadow. You've got 5 wells in the Meadow now. So 975 gallons per minute is that supply. And that you might keep that number in mind as we go through. And right now you're using only about 2/3 of that supply. So your max day in 2021 was about 590. We'll go over that some more. The mountain is quite a bit more complicated because we've got bedrock wells that, you know, they don't produce as robustly as the meadow wells, but you know, there's the list of wells in the table there, but the number to remember on the mountain right now is you have 540 gallons per minute of usable supply. Okay, that's that effective rate in the middle third column over from the left. Now we'll talk about this some more as you are presently not using some of the wells on the mountain. Number 3, which is an alluvial well, number 5, and number 6. There's also commitment on number 7 for the YC water. But anyway, in the future, one of the things you can do in the future is treat well 3, 5, and 6. You have to treat those. At that point, you raise your capacity up to 660 gallons per minute, and that's that far right hand column. Now, one of the things, you know, DEQ has a standard, I have it there in the text, maximum day demand, largest well out of service. So right now, even though Mountain 6 is not something you want to turn on because it's got the hydrogen sulfide water, you can use that as your max well. So it's equipped, it's a approved source. It would flow at about 450 gallons per minute. And since you've got that pipeline from mountain to meadow, it also acts as the largest well on the meadow. So in terms of the meadow supply, we don't have to take away one of the meadow wells as the largest well because we've got that connection from the mountain. So we can use...
Well, are the PWSs in the mountain and meadow?
Yes, they're connected.
There are one.
Yeah.
Can I ask you one question on 6 at the same time? Or I'm going to ask Jim. We've had a couple of bumps where we had to introduce 6 into the booster station for the Cascade tank. We never had a complaint. Remember, we were always hesitant on the well 6 because of complaints and the sulfur. And once we blended it at that point with the tank in Cascade, never had a problem. Is there a procedure that we can use to maximize that without treatment?
There was a short duration. The reason we were successful, we blended about 10%. So you're not getting the volume that is there. We're trying to get through short-term crisis. What we get. To put it in the category as a full supply.
So it's a spare tire at this point when we had that tank down to about 4 feet.
It's one of those little tires.
And I remember we did it. We did it at a meeting. Well, we immediately looked for complaints. So we'd go to the Summit Hotel front desk and say, "Hey, how's everything at the guest complaint?" So yeah. Okay, so
it makes itself known when we do it.
Okay.
How to do it at a very minimum level.
Such a high output.
Well, and here's the thing. Let's say you had a problem and you needed to delve into some more capacity. You could turn 5. 5 is an approved legal source too, and that flows at a lower rate. You know, you could neck it down.
So 10% was the plan.
You could do that. So, but that Mountain 6 is the largest well, plays an important role in terms of meeting the DEQ standard. And so that rate, those rates is above available rate, 540 and the 660. Those are not including the largest one. Now what happens is when you treat 3, 5, and 6, because 5 and 6 can't sustain the high rates, you're not going to treat for those rates. So you're going to knock those down, and you can see I've got them at 110. Well, at that point, Mountain Well 1 becomes the largest well in the system. And so we're taking 910 gallons per minute total minus 250. That's how we get to where we get. And it still acts as the largest well down into the meadow because the meadow doesn't exceed 250. They match it. So that's kind of how that works out. And we'll talk a little bit more about 3, 5, and 6, I believe, on some subsequent slides. But so now we're into water use. Is there any questions on that one? We're good with the wells. So this first table is just showing you the use summary from 2014 to 2021. And there's, you can see if you come across the bottom, let's just look at year 2021. You had 362,000 gallons was the average day. That turns out to be 406 acre feet for the year. Your maximum day was 850,000, which was the max for the whole period to be looked at. And there's your 590 gallons per minute. So remember, you had 975. So 2021, your max day used 590. And that was the largest use you had over that period, 2014 to 2021. So you've got a fair amount of reserve there. Now in the SFE column, you can see those last two entries, 2020, 2021, are the same. What we've done there is it takes a while for an SFE to come online and use water from when it's actually permitted. So in order to get a more correct unit water use rate, we've adjusted those SFEs. So we took 50% of the SFEs that occurred in 2020, and 0% of the SFEs in 2021. That's why those numbers duplicate. So those will be realized in the years to come, but that's the estimate for what's online. So the unit water use rate is what we use in the projection. So that ADD is average day demand per SFE. So you're at 117 gallons per day per SFE for the average, and 274 gallons per day per SFE for the peak. That's your max day. So we just multiply those numbers by SFEs through time based on the SFE projection. And you'll see in the meadow, you come out with, in 2042, you come out 1,189 acre feet, 1,727 gallons per minute. Well, if you look back, I think that you have 975, you can see in 2030, you're over that, right? We're at 984. So that's when the meadow's tapped out. Now that might not be realized till 2032 because of that SFE lag that I just mentioned. So it's, 2030, 2032, somewhere in there, the meadow is going to be tapped out of water supply from those core wells.
So why was the daily demand higher 2020, 2021 of this if these were fundamentally the same?
It just can be climatic. They just use different amounts of water. It's what you pumped. So there could have been less irrigation or less use.
The irrigation's what, 7 times the winter use for irrigation in the summer in the third quarter. This year, maybe.
Not saying that it spikes a lot. That really is an indication of how hot and dry summer is.
Right.
That's all it is.
So this is on your summer irrigation, which is an interesting thing we should all factor in as we look ahead.
Yeah.
Reuse, the matrix we're working on right now for reuse and how to divert some of that pressure.
Yeah.
It's a good question, though.
Yeah, and actually, meadow, when you look at these columns here, it's fairly consistent over time. I mean, there's certainly some wiggles in there, but the numbers aren't wildly different. The mountains, they are. We'll look at those. But anyway, that's the number to remember, is that 2030, 2032 horizon is based on the present growth rate. That's when the meadow supply wells are going to be maxed out on max.
But that doesn't include the subsidies that they get from the mountain.
Right.
So the mountains, you're
a
key to subsidizing that at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's supply side.
So here's the mountain. The mountain's an interesting one because look at this number up here in 2014. So, you have very high average day and max day numbers up to 248 and 717. Well, by the time we get to 2021, we're down to 127 and 241. So
That hill leak alone last year was big. A big
Yeah.
plus.
well, but yeah, it certainly helped, but you can see these numbers kind of decline almost monotonically all the way down. So you're at a third of the max day. So that's a huge thing. And the other thing is these numbers kind of come in line with what we're seeing in the meadow. The meadow still has more irrigation, but at least we're kind of matching up use.
You don't have the irrigation on the mountain, are there?
Right.
That's the key. That's
Yeah.
Some use.
Was 2014 a hot summer? It was an anomaly in both.
Could have been. Leaks.
You know, I think across the board, and Mike, I give credit to the Yellowstone Club. I mean, all of us have seen our use per SFE go down. I think yours has gone down exponentially through the years. You guys have done a great job at tightening things down and addressing things.
What? I don't think that, is that even part of your calculations in here?
We've subtracted them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they do,
Just the
it's in the report. I showed you YC and they definitely come down.
Yeah, I know the meter use is definitely come down from leak detections, but it's not an SFE base.
Per SFE.
It's not.
Got it.
We don't do that.
Yeah, well, just the overall use has declined substantially.
That's the leak detection program.
Right. So
And restriction, and all the things to go with it.
So if you look at the projections here on the mountain, here we're at 597 in 2042. Well, our number was 540 is what we got today. Oops, can I go backwards somehow? Okay. So what I say in the plan and what we come up with is about 2038 is when you need to bring that treatment on for wells 3, 5, and 6. And that bumps you up to 660. Of course, you're going to have revised this plan 2 or 3 times by then. The projections may have changed and so on. So we're still assuming that everything stays the same. That probably is not going to be the case. But anyway, for what we have today and what we know today, your existing supply covers you out. It actually goes out to 2046 with the treatment. And anyway, that's how that turned out. So you're
What year did you say we need the treatment?
2038 based on this projection. So
Your well
you
6.
5, 3, 5, and
6.
6.
I was just thinking 6 is the heavy hitter. But
Yeah.
And this is the linear projection off of today.
Well, 6 and 5 are knocked down to 110.
If we do some conversions, some purple pipe conversions and things like that, start keep pressing on our irrigation with reclaimed water and whatnot on different properties, this number even look better, right?
Yeah, I think you see that. Well, I got some things in the plan on that that'll definitely lower those numbers. And we'll talk about those in a few slides here. So anyway, the mountain, as far as we can tell today, with that reduction in use is in good shape. So here's a surplus capacity plot. We just talked about these numbers. I'm just showing you graphically. So here's the meadow. This is green line. You can see, because I'm not incorporating any SFE lag effect here. So, you cross the red line in 2030. It might not happen until out here in 2032. On the mountain, here's your projection here. You add this new this treatment in 2038, and you're good out to sometime just before 2046. That's what that plot shows. So just summary.
So Mark, real quick, you have a kind of a spread out analysis over a 12-month cycle, kind of averaging over the year, but you have a prediction of in August.
Well, we work off that max data minimum.
I know, but we don't have a linear flow out of our system over the years, you know, so I don't know, Jim, you could agree, but we should look at a micro month in there if you drain your tanks, even though.
No,
this-
no, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. See, if you meet that max day demand, that's kind of your worst case
Yeah, that's true.
scenario. So you should be, you know, you should be fine. And the numbers I'm using, right? So on the meadow, I didn't get into this, but I had it noted on the table. I'm using the 90th percentile of the data we observed. So I'm kind of pushing you out to the high end. And then on the mountain, I did use the 2021 unit water use rates. Those were the lowest, but you may come down some more. You know, so I think that's it's a reasonable way to go with that. So this one is in terms of your SFEs. What you end up with, and this is within the existing supply, so not adding any new supply, okay? So you've got very similar numbers of total SFEs available in each location on the order of almost 1,900, okay? Now, if you look at this table here below, there's already allocated SFEs. Okay, there's commitments the district's already made. So town center phase 2 and platted subdivisions, those are not built yet in the meadow, but the district has committed to 930 SFE. Okay. So that leaves in the meadow about 928 SFEs that are not committed yet. Now, in the mountain, you've got platted subdivisions have about 322 SFEs. I should mention this. Those subdivisions, I can determine how many empty lots there are in the platted subdivision, and then I assign 2 SFE to each lot. That's how you get to that. So you've got half of those numbers is the actual lot, number of vacant lots. So we've got, in the mountain, we've got Lone Moose Condominiums has 36 more. I did put a note in here because, you know, everyone's talking about this sewer only commitment that the district has. Well, that's based on 38.3 million gallons per year. It's not even based on SFE. For whatever reason, that agreement throws in there and says equivalent of 900 SFE, but it specifically says this agreement is not based on SFE. Okay. So it seems very clear from that agreement to me that that's a wastewater only thing, but I just put it in there because people might have that question looking at it. So Big Sky Resort has 600 SFE on the mountain. The Community Housing Trust.
Okay, just clarify the Big Sky Resort too. Big Sky Resort has a pool, of course, which, you know, Longmont land, and everyone has a pool. We have 600 SFEs, but we also have flat. Are we covered in the platted subdivisions, or did you basically take away from those? In other words, we have our pool, and then we'll have Cascade Track 2A.
Well, that would be in the 322 if it's undeveloped.
I just want to see
It
if
could be double counted.
Yeah, I want to make sure that they weren't double counted.
So what? Tell me that again. So I may not.
So you need to look, if you do a search, of course you have the pool, that's easy to reconcile. But the platted subdivision, you should do basically a search for Big Sky Resort LLC, Boyne Properties.
Now, if they're in a platted subdivision though, and they're not developed, wouldn't that show up the way I did?
As long as I'm just double checking that you are giving us credit for the pool. And then when we
The
go
pool
up,
is the 600.
got it.
Yeah, but the pool's the 600. What he's saying is they consume some of that 600, maybe have it up above in the table based on commitments and plat.
I want to make sure we get credit for the
Right.
plat as well. And then we'll worry double.
So like some of the lots you counted that are Big Sky Resort Holdings or whatever, you've counted 2 SFPs in the table above. Those should reduce to 600.
So they come out of the pool.
No, I'm sorry.
They're
saying the opposite. I
You
want to
still
make
have
sure.
600 today
I have 600
of
in the
unused
pool. I'm in the pool.
that have never been used.
Never been used.
Okay.
They all have
Then
opinions.
he's right.
Yeah. I just wanted to double check that you didn't look at Big Sky Resort LLC and subtract out the platted subdivision for what we own. There are two separate different buckets.
No, because see, on the platted, what I did is I just went to Madison County.
Right.
I
You didn't
did
look up Big Sky Resort.
I
You just looked up
intersected their
platted.
parcels with the district service area, and I queried for the number of undeveloped or
Got it.
vacant.
Got
And I did the same.
Regardless of ownership.
Yeah, I didn't even look at the
Yeah.
others.
Got it.
Yeah.
Ron and I have gone back and forth this a number of times on what is our maximum build out. You have to add the two of those. So we're good.
Okay, okay. good.
Brian, what's
Well,
the
it's nice
number
not
for
to
that?
change any.
For that 900,
Which 900?
yeah, for the 900 for Longos and the 38 million gallons.
What is
What are
it?
we using for SFE? 100,
It comes out to about 116.
160,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is what we're using for Spanish people.
Using 107 per DQ. That was their recommendation in November of 2020. So it's 107. But the work Mark's doing, there's a pretty good correlation with what he's coming up with gallons per day for SFE and what we're using for permanent basis. And that's a wastewater number, 107.
So 928 appears to be the number uncommitted in the meadow. Only 327 uncommitted in the mountains. And that comes only after you've treated 3, 5, and 6. Okay, so that 327, when you treat 3, 5, and 6, you get like another 740. Out of those 740, you've got 327 that are uncommitted. So there's quite a bit less uncommitted on the mountain area than in the on to the water rights. The water rights generally are very good. So you've got a bunch of them. Basically, there's two critical things about these water rights. Okay. One is, if you look at that column that says completion date, it's the 5th one over from the left. So the district has applied and obtained extensions on completing these rights. You can see all those numbers are out 2033, 2032. So those dates are important for a couple of reasons. One is, as you get towards those dates, if you're not having used the water rights, you need to reapply for extensions. The other is that because those dates are out in the future, you can continue to perfect these rights by adding wells, increasing capacity of wells if you have that potential. And you don't have to go through the historic use analysis. So generally, as long as your effect on the area is no different than the original permitted right, you're able to add wells onto those existing rights. The meadow has, and the other important thing about the water rights is the volume, right? So the volume you have in the meadow, I show it as 1,554 acre feet, okay? If you look at that little first bullet on the right, your 2042 number is 1189. Okay, so you're not exceeding the volume of that right in the meadow by 2042. And, you've got about 1290 of rate, okay? You might have to add rate at some point assuming you have the water to do that. So the way it works in Montana is the only things you can really change are the place of use, the type of use. You can add diversions onto a right, but you can't change the volume or the rate. Okay, that's something that has to go through beneficial use. Right now, in this area, good luck with the volume if you want to increase the volume, right? Because now you're depleting surface water, you're in that whole deal. Okay, but if the way you have to increase rate in Montana is you have to file a beneficial use permit and ask for more rate, but zero volume. Okay, so you don't have a depletion effect when you do that. That's the procedure you have to go through. Still have to make a filing. DNRC reviews it. You have to go through this area of effect analysis, and it's a pretty detailed application. And of course, there's a public comment period, where you can get objections. But as far as the volume goes, you're sitting fine, and at some point you're going to want more rate, in the meadow. In the mountain, okay, that one, if you also have the completion dates pushed out to 2033 as shown. I'll just leave it it's described in the document, but there's some issues with Mountain 1, 2, and 3, and that when 5 and 6 were permitted, they rolled all the volume from 1, 2, and 3 into 5 and 6, and so all the volumes of 1, 2, and 3 went away, and that's why I show those kind of grayed out. They're rolled into that 592 in the far right on the volume. But anyway, if you look at the Mountain Village, the bullet next to that table you're at 506 acre feet, 2042. Well, when we deduct the YC component from the well 7 right, you've got 742. So you're substantially over what you're going to use. And that is without even looking at the next table down, which is the Aspen Grove, Hidden Village number 2, and Lone Moose wells. You've got another 325 acre feet of volume in those. Well, that pushes your sort of mountain acre foot over 1,000 acre feet, whereas, based on the current data, our projection is 506 by 2042. So you've got quite a bit of additional volume available there. I did list your surface water rights. I do discuss those in the plan. I'm not going to do much with those today. They're late priority date rights, and I'm not seeing where there's much municipal use for those, even though there is a municipal type of use included in those rights. Okay. So I do have a recommendation for a filing that the district could look at in the next year here. And that is, if you look at that type of use, so third column from the right just says use, kind of jogs left and right because you come down. So what the district would like to do is have all those uses as municipal. Okay. Right now, the mountains commercial, the Aspen Grove, Hidden Village, Lone Moose, those multiple domestic. And I would expect the district could qualify to change that type of use to municipal. And the advantage of that is that the municipal wells, when they're less than 450 gallons per minute, when you need to replace that well in the future, you don't have to file a change application to do that. Okay. It's right now it's like a one-page form. You just send it in and you're done. Okay. Well, that's definitely something the district, given that all your wells are less than 450 or at or less than, that's definitely something the district wants to do. The other thing you can do in that same filing is you can make the place of use the entire service area of the district. DNRC does get to review that. That would be a change application, but you wouldn't be asking for any new rate. You wouldn't be asking, and you'd be just changing type of use and place of use. So a fairly innocuous submittal.
Will it go to adjudication?
Well, the way the adjudication applies to the claims. So the provisional permits don't come into the adjudication. So you'd only be changing the provisional permit.
It does go out for public notice and the opportunity for any affected water right owners to object.
Yeah, any change or beneficial use does that. I think it would be pretty innocuous though, because you're not adding any rate, you're just changing the type of use to municipal. I mean, clearly the district's growing. I mean, you've got a town center here, the mountains got character that you could find in a municipal setting.
Were they filed under commercial when it was Lone Mountain Springs?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so why would Lone Mountain Springs have filed under commercial?
Who knows? It's up to whoever submitted.
The appropriate word at the time.
Let us know. Let us know next
Because
week.
at the time, we probably didn't have a good development of the term municipal. Municipal incorporates all of those uses. And in the application process, you designate, you say this is municipal use and we can use it. So we could use it for more irrigation, but in the application process, you do define, we estimate it'll be X for commercial, X for domestic, X for irrigation. But if you get the municipal designation, then in a summer or a whatever, we get to use, we need more for, we have a line break, so we're going to redirect some of our irrigation water to municipal, and we don't have to do any filings because of that.
So those were all filed by Boyne or Lone Mountain Springs back in the day.
Right. And it makes sense, Brian, right? I mean, at the time when they were contemplating it.
Right. Well, it wasn't a municipality either.
Right.
The point was.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and municipal use in this term it's not municipality. It's all encompassing to be able to mix between commercial, domestic, and residential and irrigation. So again, redefining of a term in a different arena, right?
Goes back to rates out, okay. Got it.
Yeah, it's quite a broad definition right now. It's something like a place that's like a municipality. It's quite general.
Which fit back then.
Yeah. So, and I've got a slide on that coming up, but or a bullet on that file that would list those rights. In fact, we're here. Okay, so. Oh, geez. Just thinking if I missed a slide. No. Okay. Well, so we came up with them. I came up with improvements. Okay. So let me just preface this a little bit. What a lot of water systems, municipalities have moved to is this integrated water resources planning. Okay. So we're not. That's where you look at all your system and it's integrated, right? So, I mean, conservation is one element of that. All your reuse, if you were doing reuse through the purple pipes and distributing that would be that. Since you're not doing that, it's kind of more on just the wastewater side. But anyway, I've got a few improvements here. So. Conservation, been around for a long time. Okay, so what I did is I looked at what type of conservation would be the most useful to the district in terms of how you manage your source capacity and the longevity of what you have. Okay, so I just looked at Meadow Village and applied some numbers for basic, almost a complete elimination of ornamental irrigation. And you save about 400 gallons per minute by 2042 with that. And I've got another slide on that, so I'll just keep moving on, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when that slide comes up. The Meadow Village alluvial aquifer, There's a couple of spots out there due to the spacing where you could put in 1 or 2 wells. One well, if you know, well 5 is the most westerly of those. You could fit one in between well 3 and well 5, which is on the driving range, so that might not work out that great, but it's potentially could go in there. And then there's good space between well 1, which is the one right at the end of Spotted Elk, and well 4, which is further to the east. There's actually quite a good space out there, and there's a fairly significant thickness of alluvium. It looks like you could get another well in there. Now, you don't need those wells for a little while, but those are 2 spots. So I estimated, let's just say 125 gallons per minute apiece, call it 250 for planning purposes, okay? With the conservation, those don't need to come online until 2035. If the conservation were to play out the way I have it, and you guys were to proceed with it. So your
We're going to
decision.
put up a short course on the screen here a little later. You just kind of look at that and identify where these wells would be located in that short course.
Oh, really?
You really do.
Okay, I've got a,
Yeah,
I'm
you're right in the middle of it. You're right in the middle of the green, probably.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
I'm
make
serious.
make it sort of a miniature golf course. We gotta bounce it off the case.
We'll make it. We'll make it a hazard not to hit it. Okay.
Yeah. So, and then the direct potable reuse, I do have that on the plan. That's an interesting one. It's not presently legal in the state, so there's rulemaking would have to happen. There'd be quite a pilot study that has to go on for this. But the interesting thing about the direct potable reuse is, I'm only looking at 150 gallons a minute in this plan. Well, you could blend that with your other drinking water, and you end up with like 78 million gallons of treated effluent. Call it disposal if you want, but now it might be, and I don't have that happen until 2040. Might be everyone wants that water for other reasons by then, right? So anyway, it's under consideration, and I got another slide on it too. I think that it would be a good thing for the district to move that along. I mean, it's becoming a water supply method in many areas right now. Right? So not so much in Montana, but other states, and particularly places with larger populations and less water. Okay, and then
That would require an upgraded plant.
that would require basically a supplementary beat that takes that effluent from the plant. So it could go in what is now a filter room. Yeah. And, this is, Scott could address this more. What I looked at was, the heart of it would be reverse osmosis, and you take that concentrate, mix it back in with the plant effluent. You take the clean water and mix that in with the meadow, go through the UV plant. The other thing about that is, you would have a disinfectant that creates a residual by the time this became legal and so on. So you'd have a chlorine disinfectant that would be required as a residual in the system to go down that path. I don't think you'd get an approval process that did not include, which is basically the same. Any surface water right now, you have to have a residual too. So that's what I would expect there. But it is interesting in the sense that you get good supply water, and you also handle some effluent and it can be on a year-round basis. So.
Do you get credit for your water right based on beneficial use if you go to this?
Well, here's the water rights is an issue, and I'm not sure. Right now, you could just take that water and use it. You would not even have to do anything. Right. So,
78 million gallons a year as we're talking about this water matrix to go from direct total reuse. I think the reuse is getting more valuable by the meeting. That's the point.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
But I just look at the water right on that as there was a second part to it.
What's the third improvement to the plant we were talking about? Phase 2B or?
Well, I call it phase 3. Phase 2 was the additional tankage that we did by change order. Phase 3 guts the filter building, puts a lot of high level treatment in there for
That's what you were talking
CECs and RO.
about. Phase 3.
Yeah. The cost estimate for that, you got your hand up.
We were at, I think, about 14 million for 250, and we just picked a 250 GPU number. 150 is probably better, especially because other people who want that water. The difference in what we did was we were trying to avoid RO, so we wouldn't have a brine. Mark came up with the concept of recycling brine into pond 3 and supposing that it wouldn't mess up TDS salt in the irrigation supply, which is right on paper. It doesn't. We brought it up to the irrigator group, and there's a lot of talk that Old Mountains golf courses already struggle with TDS, and Mark and I were talking about that. And I think we need to look at it more, but I think it's a sodium chloride issue. It might be helped with switching from all the chlorine used down here and everywhere to, with Mark, you were saying, calcium tablets or calcium chloride.
Yeah, calcium hypochlorite. You can even go to gas depending on, that's of course not favorable in populated areas, but depending on how isolated you are. Because I think they're adding about 26 milligrams per liter sodium hypochlorite. So that's 26 milligrams of sodium added when you do that. I'm sure there's sodium also in the effluent.
And that's just down here, right? Mark doesn't account for what Old Mountain does on there. That's right.
Right. Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So they're getting more.
Right, that's it.
I just thought,
Yeah.
There might be some good to be done here regardless of what happens with pollinators and maybe we could bring the quality of the irrigation water up even higher and allow for Mark's concept something. Because RO is but for potable reuse, whereas if you try to drink wastewater without RO in it, 10 different processes and still a little bit of risk tolerance. That's
And the direct potable, of course, is going to advance tremendously. One of the things you see is I would expect is you're going to have to run a pilot facility for probably several years and measure your contaminants of emerging concern and place
And an insane marketing campaign.
well, yeah, because you're getting public acceptance, and you're getting the DEQ and the legislature to accept that it can be done safely. So,
There'll be pressure on, I think on places like Eastern Montana and other places.
Arizona.
Yeah, other areas. I was even thinking the state of Montana, but other places nationally are going to be having to really prioritize this so we can ride those coattails.
it's really taken off, like Mark said. And it's, some of it is just pure necessity for have water otherwise. Some of it is resiliency. We'll always have that water. May not always have a 10-year drought or something. You have some dry wells, something like that. But you'll always have some wastewater.
Got it.
Thank you.
So the next improvement is this well water level monitoring sensors. So the district right now only monitors water level in Meadow Village #1. So this is actually kind of an expensive improvement.
Also,
But it's something you need to chip away at and get to happen, particularly on the mountain where we've got 5 and 6. the Lone Moose wells that we know are less robust than the other wells. And so for the operators to be able to tune in on those numbers and see what they're getting, that's going to be essential for them to decide on what rates they operate those wells at. And so
Have you talked to Microcom about a proposal for that? Because recharge predictability is going to be a big thing.
well, it's more than just them. They're one part of it, but you've got to pull the pumps and set an instrument tube in there, set the instrument. You've either got to have a radio system or you've got to run conduit and horizontal. And I've got a slide on this. It ends up being like 8,000 feet of wire in the ground with conduit. And so, you might go a radio option. I don't know.
There's opportunity for a fixed base water metering platform to read these loggers, and you put a smart gateway on them, and you just use that as your data collection. In fact, I think that would be a front runner versus Microcom for this exercise.
It would also be good data to target other water sources that may be.
Right, yeah, there's a lot of beneficial use to it, but we are going to be looking at other options that are more cost effective than what Mark is proposing. But he's given us a cut and dry with what we have in our system and what we can easily do. So.
Yeah, and I didn't get into flow metering. I mean, you've got bulk metering on the mountain because you go into Hill Booster Station with your core wells. You've got a meter there. Would be nice to have meters on every well, but you don't necessarily have to have them. Meadow, that's something else. I didn't put it in the plan, but it's something else to kind of chip away at as you get the chance. The water right filings I mentioned. I think I have a slide. I guess I covered everything this bullet shows. So the other one, the Mountain Village hydraulic upgrades, was a new one. So when you treat Mountain 3, 5, and 6, that's not needed out till 2035. The plan there is that supplies the upper system above the Cascade booster. So right now, what Mountain Village does is it pumps every drop of water up the top of the hill and it trickles it back. Okay. So what you can do, and you can, and I have a engineering study is what this improvement is you can start to put the core wells into the lower system, the resort area, and use that 500K mountain tank that's just been refurbished in the past years. And you can have the Cascade booster just be basically demand on that system. And so through this improvement, depending on how that study turned out, it could be as simple as a electronically controlled valve that when Cascade needs water, lets it have water out of that lower system, because the tank, the 500K tank, is higher than the Cascade booster. So if you do that, you'll kind of stop that crazy system of pumping to the top. You'll keep the resort area water in the resort area, use the 500K tank. You'll provide enough water for the Cascade system through the process I just described. One of the issues with that is that 1.5 million gallon tank needs to cycle, right? Or you could get adverse water quality issues. So, you can still bring some water back down into the resort to deal with that. You could, you put an in-tank mixer in it. You could reduce the level of that tank some number of feet and just and store less in it. And that's why, there's a study for that. But that's something you could do right away. And when you do the treatment in the future, what would happen is wells 3, 5, and 6 would be plumbed directly into this treatment facility and go to the Cascade booster and serve the Cascade. But you would still have wanted a supply from the lower system in case, under certain circumstances, those wells couldn't handle it. So you would have that that automated supply connection in place through this step, which you could do in the next few years here and reduce that amount of pumping. You could, as part of that study, you could look at if the Cascade booster pumps could be reduced, because you wouldn't need, you don't need to lift all that water. They're capable of about 850 gallons a minute right now. So you would not need that capacity. So that's kind of that improvement.
Mark, I'm going to add one last thing, Jim, maybe you could share with Mark. That 500,000 gallon tank that's been there since 1973, the original tank for the whole place, technically. We are going to be developing, the Montana Club goes up to basically the elevation that's consistent with the Cascade tank. Just say that plus or minus, we'll call it the mid station. It's also right at the edge of the district boundary. So you're going to the west, you're going up the mountain. So the 500,000 gallon tank, Boyne will need to replace that, move up so you can get the gravity feed back down into the Montana Club. So,
Well, you got a picture right now, it's all basically gun pressure zone. What Mark's saying is the goal here in the engineering stage is only take the water that we heat up top. Right now, we're taking all the water up.
you mean up a Cascade?
Yeah, 97% is coming back. And in the plans I've talked with you guys in Germany, it sounds like you're going to be adding to that upper pressure zone. That would be coming out to 1.5 billion gallons. Now, once you guys get hydraulically above that.
Yeah.
So if you guys go hydraulically above that sometime in the far future, we would have 3 tanks, because the 500 would stay where it is.
Just for, so you don't have to do the PRVs
Right.
coming back
So
down.
you would add a 3rd tank, 3rd storage, some way to get water up to that upper zone. But the utility and the purpose of the 500K is still there, and it's 150. So we're only going to, the strategy here would be to not take 100% of the water at Cascade, only what we need to draw. And it's similar to what we're doing at the Meadow Booster. The distribution system in the Mountain Village would become a 3rd well source for the Cascade, basically we pull off that.
So maybe to just share with Mark real quick, just summarize. What I'm hearing you say is the 500K tank stays there for the Mountain Village proper. And Montana Club Phase 1. Remember, we just finished Phase 2 that picked up that pressure from the Cascade tank. So just to identify this area, it's a simple one. I'll make it brief. But so Montana Club Phase 3 that we'll be working on right now will be the boneyard. That will be picked up by Cascade pressure system.
According to Jeremy, that's still within the pressure zone of that tank.
So
As
as
you
we,
get above that, then you're starting to get it. Obviously, water won't blow uphill. So once you get above that, then you need to talk additional way to get water higher.
and that's about the bottom of Challenger.
So
We figured
there's
the
a,
bottom of Challenger was this tipping point. We're talking about having to have cisterns or water tanks above the mid station of the gondola, and that's right at the district boundary. So my point is that 500,000 gallon tank, I didn't realize that was in stone, forever. But that's fine. It's just we're going to design around that. And we would maybe have to, that tank's pretty prominent out there, even though the timbers come up around it. All you need is one beetle kill to have that baby right in the middle of the village. So just kind of factor that in, moving ahead.
the report, I have a map that shows the resort area and the Cascade system. And I changed that a little. I don't know if you saw this, but I basically bounded it based on elevation.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't.
Okay, but you could, the area you're talking about is, you can see what's covered and what wouldn't. And that line is sort of approximate, but it's probably pretty close.
Yeah. I think that the difference is that we assumed that we would build a larger tank up above in the Montana Club that would gravity feed down into the village that would replace the 500K tank. What I'm hearing you say is that system that we have in Cascade to pump all the way up, gravity feed down with PRVs. We hate PRVs sometimes, like the Summit Hotel one. So the point being is, it sounds like that's going to remain, and we're going to have to design around those pressure points going up to the bottom of the Challenger.
Yeah, it's basically we want to stay with the principle of only taking the water, pumping the water up that you need, not taking it all and bringing it all down for the reasons you just said. So actually it would simplify what you would want to do. If one decides someday to develop way higher than what you are now, you don't want to build any bigger tank or do anything more than what you need for that area, different pressure zones. So it's actually a simpler, cheaper position to allow the 500K tank, which is the workhorse, everything was there to continue to do its job. So 1.5 million gallons is the workhorse of the Cascade area. If you go higher than that, you probably need a different tank, probably a small one, depending on what you're going to build up there. But don't take all the water up and then bring it all the way back down. It's the efficiency efficiency defunction that we've got going that I'm trying to rectify for a lot of.
We only have one gap to fill now. And again, the 500K tank stays. That's what's coming out of this today. The number one gap will be from the bottom of Challenger up to the mid station of the tunnel. That's it. Then anything after that will go to a different situation. But I think we got it covered. That's a lot of pressure when you look at going all the way across the valley between that Cascade tank and that area in there. That's amazing how much pressure comes out of there.
And this was all recommendations from the 2015 report that Woodard Kern did for us, and WGM Group did some water right work on that.
That's good. No,
At that time, they estimated we'd save about 60 grand in electric pumping costs if we can split the demand where it needs to go without pumping it all up the hill.
Sounds like the Cascade 1.5 tank was a little overkill, and that system maybe wasn't the most efficient.
Not necessarily. If it was a standalone system, you have all of Montana Club, all of Orange, everything up there. You have a scale of 1 to 10, you have about a 12 when it comes to wildland interface. They have some extra fire storage water up there.
Yeah,
I'm not going to complain because we overdid it. So where it was overdone when we inherited it, it's a wonderful thing. Plus, because this is one PWSID, one water system, that 1.5 million gallons and the 500,000 gallon and whatever else is fire and water storage for the duct.
Yeah, that's great.
So it's all interconnected. So no, there's no wasted effort there.
Actually, the point that maybe was we of course didn't anticipate back then is we just kept going up the mountain on elevation from Montana Club. I never thought we'd go above Challenger.
We did.
We talk about it.
We'd put a bathroom at the top of the tram if we had.
So here's a estimate of costs. Conservation's sort of almost free, but you're going to want to put some more thought into that. I've got a slide on it coming up, but basically those improvements that I just outlined, estimated budget just under 500K. The sensors is the big one. The test wells, I have those actually as being done like 2025. You could defer them a little there. My thinking is find out what you got, soon. So in case you have to replan them, so it wouldn't be bad to do those sooner rather than later. But that's kind of a look at that, and that's of course in the report, or this will be an updated report. And here's kind of just a timeline for you. Conservation, anytime you can start it right now. The sensors, you might distribute that over a few years. I'm just showing you 2 years. The direct potable reuse, that's just a engineering report is all that is, to just move that ahead. The water right filing, you could do that next year, and then same with this engineering study. You can do that anytime and get those things to move ahead. So the irrigation, the conservation is kind of interesting. It's been around for a long time, right? Well, what I see when I look at it is these voluntary and incentive type conservation measures, rebates, et cetera. they really don't do much for your system. You know, if you could ever get 25%, that would be great. What you see is, you know, anything from a few percent to maybe 15% participation. So if you really want to get something out of conservation, it's got to be mandatory. You won't get much out of it otherwise. And the other thing about those voluntary programs and educational and so on is they actually take a fair amount of time, right? So you're engaged in that. The district participates with Gallup River Task Force. They've got a nice website section on conservation, and if I understood them correctly, they got like about a 2.5% participation in their program, and so I mean, mandatory is kind of the only way to really get anything to happen with conservation. And some of the conservation literature advocates for this, 500 square feet irrigated. It can be any shape. I just show you that 22 by 22, but it's basically an elimination of almost all outdoor ornamental water. But the savings are pretty substantial. You recall that Meadow Village was about 274 gallons per day per SFE. That would drop you down to 190, approximately 190 is by my calculations. So that's something for the board to consider. And then I show you in that last bullet, you're that 1,727 gallons per day gets knocked down to 1,343. That's almost 400 gallons per minute. So that's a substantial capital improvement savings, realized through that action. The sensors, here's just some numbers as to, regarding that $270,000 cost. I threw Mountain Well 1 in, Meadow Well 1 in, so it's 12 wells, but there's the 8,050 feet. And of course, as Ron and Vince mentioned, there's other options out there that this is probably the status quo worst case you could come up with. Here's a plot of the test wells in Meadow Village. So a little hard to see through. What I'm showing you is the colorful areas are the estimated thickness of the alluvium. So this white band here, where the existing meadow wells are, is kind of an anomalously thick section of alluvium. And so I'm showing you one of those test wells. I call it number 4 because we did test wells 1, 2, and 3 in the meadow years ago, prior to wells 5, 4, and 5 ago. And then here's another test well over here. Here's meadow well 4. So there's good thickness there. You're offset equivalently from the channel as the existing wells, which is important for the water right filing aspects of this. So that's where those are. I do want to, the report does talk about that test well 9 that got terminated. There's certainly water at that location. I think, the district knows about that. It's in the report. I don't have any improvements related to that. The access issue needs to be dealt with, but, there is iron and manganese in that water potentially. We never got to finish that test well to see what the situation was at that particular location, but, you could expect treatment requirements potentially in that area. But appears to be significant capacity there. Direct potable reuse, all the plan is showing now is an improvement to look at it, to start the process and move along and see if you, have favorable conditions, to see if this becomes a viable option for the district. Here's kind of the meadow, how the meadow responds to this. This graphic is in the report. So here's our surplus. The green line's the same green line I showed for the meadow earlier. So conservation gets you out 4 years or so. Then you add those meadow wells, that takes you out to year 2040, and then 2040, you could bring in the direct potable. You know, I'm not showing what happens with the Thunderwolf chairlift groundwater, but that's got potential there. Here's just some more details on that water right filing. I think we pretty well covered that, but it would be these 5 water rights that you could file that change on there.
I think we should do that no matter what, right?
I think,
Yeah.
And lastly, we've kind of talked about all the details of this, but this is again an engineering study to look at taking care of that pumping issue in Mount. So that's it.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, thanks, Mark. Jim, do you agree with all that?
Yeah, I open the numbers and the times, and we got that much time, that's for sure, you know. Depending on, I still can't explain why we're using so much less water, but it's a good thing, no problem with that. But obviously, you know, our rate has changed. There's a lot of factors into it. We've done everything we can to verify that data. It's pretty great.
Yeah, we actually put a portable meter on Cascade. Ran it for a week and it actually came out. Yeah. So, but it was consistent. There wasn't a real bias and, you know,
So
so.
obviously we've been doing leak detection, we've done hill condos, I know nothing more than pat myself on the back and the crew, but it is surprising to me also. It's a good surprise.
So Mark's advocating conservation basically starting right away. So what's our first step to that? Is study, subcommittee, recommendations? Yes.
I think conservation is pretty well spelled out. I mean, we either mandate it or we keep doing voluntary. So,
Or you raise rates.
or we punitive damages, yes.
So if we go mandatory, then we have to have some type of
A whole
guidelines.
other division of this company. A whole other division of this company.
Well, you work with the SOA on that, and I guess other HOAs. I think Skeleton River Task Force could probably make the bill a lot easier to swallow for people with their education prior to the mandatory and explaining and stuff. I think they're a good vehicle to educate and such. I certainly agree with Mark. We've watched the volunteer stuff because it really gets the job done. So eventually it has to be mandatory, but raising rates overnight might be a little extreme, but a preemptive educational campaign is to kind of explain where we're going and all that would probably be effective.
Well, and there's details to it too, because you're gonna have to figure out how do you enforce it or check up on that it's being done, that kind of thing.
It's fairly draconian. It has to be a rollout. You can't just like, we're 500 square feet of Kentucky bluegrass. No problem.
Yeah.
500. Everyone knew their grass, you know, it'd have to be some like 5-year rollout or something like that, where we incrementally move towards that. Or
Yeah. If you did it like district wide, yeah, you have a grace period. You know, the newbies coming in undeveloped is right away, but the ones that exist, you can have a phase.
Yeah. And I don't think the rate structure for encouragement and discouraging people to overwater, it's not quite as effective when you're in a community if the median home price is $3 million. So your water, I just looked at some of these water bills that come out during irrigation season. It goes from about $240 per quarter to about $480. So if I go blow right through that, just run it all the time and not take my time, it goes to $580. And we watch it all the time with the water sensitivity. The point being, it was ours is about 8 times the use for irrigation season.
And it doesn't sting one bit.
Yeah.
It doesn't sting enough.
Well, you know Bozeman, and
Yeah.
Bozeman is, so we're at 250 a quarter. Bozeman, when we had irrigation out in Sundance Springs, it was 250 a month. It was 250 a month for what we were paying for a quarter on standard. So the point being, I have a tough time with raising those rates, just in the sense I don't think you're going to get the response that someone's going to say, I'm turning off my irrigation because I'm pushing that 62,000 gallon tier from my 1.6 SFE.
You're just gonna get more revenue.
You get more revenue, but you're not going to get.
Yeah.
He loves it. I believe that. I believe that's going to be really hard. So I think it has to be 100% enforcement of. I don't know if it's a 20 by 20 piece, but
Well, it can be any sheet.
but it's a two-pronged approach. It's for existing properties that have everybody do technically grass, and it's a two-pronged approach. New properties, I think we could really drop the hammer proactively with these restrictions. And then, of course, looking back, maybe incentives, maybe education. That's it. But I got to tell you, I hate you to raise rates, but it's just not. I don't think it's a strong enough incentive to use less.
But that's something we should be doing with the cash. The cash doesn't replace
Right.
the water,
Right.
but the cash could be an incentive program to reduce your landscape use by whatever, and we'll pay cash for that.
That's what Bozeman does.
Yeah.
Right, that's the approach that
Yeah,
you need.
you want $1,000.
Well, you still end up with low participation. If it's not, you could, that's the problem. So even when you do the buyback, they don't get great participation.
Yeah.
If you were to hire a consultant, a landscape expert to basically review properties on a case-by-case basis and make it dense. So you take that funding, you go in, you do a free evaluation or an audit of what they're doing. The Sweetgrass Hills 1 acre lots in the system, all Kentucky bluegrass around it. And if you cut that down, you cut 3 zones, you can cut it by 30 or 50%. Go to drip to this. I think part of it's education and providing that audit for some of these properties that we know are good bidders.
Yeah, I went through and kind of manually at the air photo, looked at irrigated areas on 16 parcels. It ranged from like 2,500 square feet to just over 14,000. The average was 8,000. So, no, maybe I was biased in my view. I didn't do any land. Significant irrigation.
But it's a glaring issue when it's, okay, maybe it's 6 times the average person or 5 times the average person in summer. That's a lot. I mean, ours went from about 9,000 to 62,000.
It's gonna take a culture change.
Yes.
Or we're not gonna be able to continue to grow. Choice.
You need a bunch of tools.
I think you have a better chance for it in this environment setting, being up in kind of a high mountain basin. It's not like you're not in Belgrade. Rectangular subdivision, it's a little different. So you might.
We can apply more guilt here.
Well, the natural landscape will fit in.
More creative landscape.
We need an armed force for the water and sewer district.
Jim, last question on it. This idea that we have watering times and things like that, and we start squeezing that down. What if you were to cut your irrigation schedule by 20%? And then I do believe that people will honor that in the sense that they don't want to have you come and buy and see their irrigation on it. I know I don't.
It's.
What if you cut it by 20%? You get a 20% reduction in underground irrigation for the.
Assuming you got participation, we've got better tools for monitoring it now.
Enforcement,
unless it becomes a full-time job, and really is that any more palatable than just phasing out the lawns? It's a culture change. I think really education, and I think once again, I'll put it on the Delta River Task Force is probably the best position to get people to say it and get people to listen to that as to why over time. Because we have so many non-residents moving here from the Midwest and other parts of the country where they have 60, 70, 80% humidity all the time, and they're not used to realizing they're living in a high plains district. So it's different. It just takes education over time. Or you can kick the front door down and raise the rate so high that it does hurt. Or whatever approach you want to use. it's clear that by a certain date, you have to assess.
A lot of absentee owners too, that don't pay attention. You know,
It's raining,
It's,
very,
or they're back home in Connecticut and don't even know that it's raining, and there's just a lot of challenges with volunteering to make some changes.
Maybe rental management companies as well. It'd be good to have a breakdown of the condo associations, and is there a way to cut those moving forward? All right. Well, great
Scott, have
guys.
you guys worked on some conservation plans like this? Maybe throw something our way that you think that would be applicable, at least a framework, and kind of work out that.
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind as we go along is that you can cut supplies off if you have severe drought. I have reason. And the turf goes brown, that incentivizes people to wake them up and say, hey, if my lawn's gonna be brown and you're offering me a turf rebate program, whatever, split the turf I clear out. It's and then you highlight somebody who's landscaping as the showcase.
Yeah.
Really pat the people on the back that are what you want.
Community owned. All right, anything else? Thanks, Mark. That was,
Thanks, Mark.
great. It's good to have you. All right.